What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we've got our Week 13 fantasy football wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup, so make sure to tune in. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear in the comment section, do you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have. We'll do our best to answer them all, but with that being said, let's get right into it. Before getting into our breakdown, I want to highlight the sponsor of today's video, OddsJam. OddsJam continues to be the place that I use for all of my sports betting research, from the NFL, NBA, MLB, to daily fantasy and everything in between. But don't just take my word for it. Let me show you firsthand all the amazing tools OddsJam has to offer. Starting with their positive EV tool, which identifies situations where a single sportsbook has mispriced their line compared to the rest of the market. They're basically willing to pay a lot more so that you bet with them compared to the other sportsbook. At the end of the day, you're getting the best odds, essentially a mathematical edge and guaranteed money in the long run. But also available is OddsJam's arbitrage tool, which shows situations where the market is so mispriced that you can bet on both sides and guarantee a risk-free return. OddsJam's calculators show you exactly how much you have to bet on the over and under and what the respective guaranteed risk-free return would be. There's also OddsJam's Sportsbook tool, which consolidates all available market info, over 200 sportsbooks, and provides updates in real time and allows you to see line movement. But my personal favorite is their Fantasy Optimizer tool, which is great for those using PrizePicks, Underdogs, or other daily fantasy sites, as you get to see discrepancies between all of these sportsbooks. Imagine, PrizePicks has a Patrick Mahomes line at 200.5 passing yards, and all other books like FanDuel and Underdog have this line at 230 passing yards. Well, getting the over 200.5 on PrizePicks would be an absolute steal. Guess what? OddsJam does that for you. And the good news is, if you sign up today and use our code PIGSKIN, check the link and promo code in the description of this video, you will get 25% off your first month. OddsJam also has a 7-day free trial, so you get to try before you buy. So don't waste any more time and sign up for OddsJam using our code PIGSKIN today. Now, we kick off Week 13 on Thursday with the Seahawks at the Cowboys. And from the Seahawks side of things, we've got DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett listed as starts. Jackson Smith and Jigba is a sit, in my opinion. Out of that trio of wide receivers, it's Metcalf and Lockett. Those are the two most involved guys. The usage for Njigba, it's not consistent, and typically it's third on that pecking order. Now, to be fair, the Seahawks offensively are not having the same success that they did last year. And throughout this offseason, we told you what Geno Smith did last year was an anomaly, and more than likely it would not continue this year, and that's exactly what's happened here. So even though Metcalf and Lockett are starts, I think that's more of a situation of the game script here, where I wouldn't be shocked if Seattle loses this game like 40-10 or something along those lines, but they're going to have to air it out. So from a PPR perspective, I think both these guys, Metcalf and Lockett, are going to see, maybe each close to 8-9 targets, something along those lines. We'll see how it plays out. But they are kind of boom or bust, a little bit more PPR-based kind of plays. So keep that in mind. They're both low on wide receiver twos for me. For the Dallas Cowboys, CeeDee Lamb, he's been a wide receiver one pretty much all season long. That's going to continue. Brendan Cooks has been on a nice little run as of late, and the Seahawks defense doesn't scare me. Dak Prescott has been playing very well. He's an MVP consideration, and, if he continues to toss multiple touchdown passes every single week, Brendan Cooks, there's a high chance that he'll be one of the beneficiaries there. So I do think he's probably going to be a touchdown-based boom or bust wide receiver too. I have him as a start. I like the matchup. And then Michael Gallup, just not seeing enough targets. Similar to the situation with Jackson Smith and Jigba, is a sit for me. Then Colts at the Titans. I'm starting Michael Pittman. I'm starting Josh Downs. Look, both these guys had over double-digit targets last week. Now, Pittman really did a lot with that. Josh Downs, unfortunately, only had, less than 50% catches on all those targets, but you can talk about quality of targets, things like that. Either way, both these guys I think are very solid PPR plays, specifically Michael Pittman at the top of the list, but Josh Downs, you could do a lot worse. I have him in the low to mid-level wide receiver 2 category. If he converts on that 1-yard touchdown last week, it would have been a much better outing as well. Titans don't scare me, and especially with Jonathan Taylor now out for several weeks, I wouldn't be shocked to see the Colts rely a little bit more on that passing attack. For the Titans, DeAndre Hopkins, if you're desperate, the main reason I have him as a start here, again, the Colts defense doesn't scare me, and I think that this is going to be a high-scoring affair, or at least it will need to be in order for the Titans to stay in the game. So Hopkins, from a PPR perspective, I think you could do okay with that, double-digit points, like 10, 11 points, something like that. But I wouldn't get my hopes up too much. We've seen it for the majority of the season, whether it's due to Hopkins himself, age, ability, or the Titans' offense with the quarterbacks. Hopkins just isn't what he used to be, plain and simple. Then Falcons at the Jets. Look, honestly, I contemplated a long time whether you should really be starting anyone in this game. I came very close to having Drake London and Garrett Wilson both as sits, so it tells you, about the fantasy upside in this game in general and the boom or bust nature of both these guys. Now, let's start with London. I feel a lot more comfortable with Drake London than I do Garrett Wilson. But this Jets defense is a stingy defense. And the Falcons, it's not like they're a high-octane offense like that of, the Miami Dolphins, for example. So I could see Drake London kind of disappearing. Desmond Ridder just not looking his way or breaking another way. I just think the Falcons offensively, you never know what you're going to get with them or what type of performance you're going to get from Ridder. I could see him being under duress. That's why London, to me, maybe not as a solid option as some people might have him. I have him as a mid-level wide receiver too, probably an even lower floor. And then for the Jets, I'm only starting Garrett Wilson in PPR formats. Let's just get that out the way right now. His upside with Boyle under center is practically zero. Like, I can tell you exactly what's going to happen in this game without even watching a second of it. It's going to be a bunch of dink and dump passes to Breece Hall. That's how he's going to be fantasy viable. And then Garrett Wilson is going to be the number 2 guy after Breece Hall. But it's going to be tough because Boyle is inaccurate, because the Falcons DBs are going to focus in on Garrett Wilson. They're going to jam him, and they're really going to make those short and intermediate throws difficult for him to come down with. Last week he was saved because of a 1-yard touchdown. If he doesn't have that, it's a very, very different type of outcome for his fantasy performance. And again, if you take out the PPR aspect, it's pretty much nothing. So that's why I'm only starting him in PPR formats. He's a wide receiver 3, folks. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Then Lions at the Saints. I'll start Amon-Ra St. Brown. Only wide receiver I have, consistent faith in here for the Lions, but he's been great. And then we've been saying it all year. After Amon-Ra, it's Laporta, it's Jahmyr Gibbs, it's David Montgomery. The other wide receivers here, just too inconsistent. Good news, though, Amon-Ra St. Brown, top 10 wide receiver. For the Saints, Chris Olave is a start, but he's dealing with a concussion. So is he going to play? Won't he play? I believe that he will. So I have him as a start. But I also think Rashid Shaheed could be a sneaky start as well, especially if Olave doesn't play. I have Olave as a high-end wide receiver too, but I think Shaheed is a low-end wide receiver too. In that same vein, the Saints are going to have to air out the football here versus the Lions. Then Broncos at the Texans. I'll start Courtland Sutton. He's been the wide receiver 1 for the Broncos for the majority of the season. Jerry Jeudy's been an afterthought, but I do have Jeudy as a start here because the Broncos are going to have to air out the football versus the Texans. That's just kind of been the MO in all the games that the Texans have been involved in. They've been higher scoring affairs, and it's been an aerial duel. So I think Jeudy can, have a decent performance here from a matchup perspective. But, if it was a different opponent, if it was a different situation, then I would say Jeudy is a non-factor. For the Texans, it's the typical duo, Nico Collins, Tank Dell. They've been sensational. And I think both can continue as high-end wide receiver 2s, low-end wide receiver 1s. Afterward, Chargers at the Patriots. Keenan Allen must start, obviously, every single week. Top 10 wide receiver, obviously top 5. This could, however, be the week where Josh Palmer returns from IR. And if it is, I'm instantly playing him because this Chargers offense has been missing a number 2 wide receiver. Like Quinn Johnston isn't it. Guyton isn't it. Palmer is going to be easily the number 2 guy, and some weeks could honestly outscore Keenan Allen. I wouldn't be shocked by that. So as long as he plays, he's an obvious start. I think he's a high-end wide receiver 2 for the Patriots. Demario Douglas, Mac Jones has been benched. Zappy expected to start. Whoever it is, I think is going to throw a bunch of balls to Douglas, but I'm only starting Douglas in PPR formats. You're looking at like 10 to 11 points. That's what it is. Let's call a spade. Wide receiver 3 category. Next up, we've got the Cardinals at the Steelers, and here I'm looking at Marquise Brown as the primary start. Greg Dortch, notice I have his name listed as a start with an asterisk. That's only if Marquise Brown, Wilson don't play. Brown dealing with a heel injury, but he had the same issue last week and ended up playing, so I envision that he will suit up again. I just think this will be a lower scoring affair. The passing volume might not necessarily be there. That's why I'm hesitant to start any 2 wide receivers from the same team here. For Pittsburgh, it's Deontay Johnson. For what I just said about the volume, George Pickens is a sit. I think Johnson is going to be the primary target here. That's been the case since he's returned. So for that reason, I have Johnson. I think both Johnson and Brown are kind of low-end wide receiver 2s. Going to be volume plays. I think the rushing attack will be featured more so in this game. Then Dolphins at the Commanders. I like this game for wide receiver purposes a lot. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle are no-brainers. I think both are wide receiver 1s. For Washington, Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel. Since his return from injury, Curtis Samuel has kind of, displaced Jahan Dotson. Dotson had like a 2-3 game run. Now, Curtis Samuel, the number 2 wide receiver. And guess what? Washington is going to have to air out the football here versus the Dolphins. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if Sam Howell sets, career highs in terms of passing attempts, things like that. So McLaurin and Curtis Samuel, I think, are both solid mid to high end wide receiver 2 plays here. And then Jahan Dotson, I think, is just way too down on the pecking order, too inconsistent. He's a sit for me. After Panthers at the Buccaneers, I'm only looking at the Bucs side of things. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Panthers don't scare me one bit. Worst team in football. So only way that Evans and Godwin don't deliver is if this game is such a blowout that the Buccaneers are up like 30-0 in like the third or fourth quarter. For the Panthers, hurts me to say this, but Adam Thielen is a sit. Jonathan Mingo I kind of have listed because last week he was a little bit more heavily involved. But here the big news is Thielen. Like, the Panthers are firing coaches. It's complete mess. And it's seeming like that they aren't featuring Thielen anymore. Like, nothing's changed with Thielen. He can still do all the things that he did before. And as bad as Bryce Young has been, like, he can still pepper Thielen with targets. What's happening here is they're specifically not drawing up plays for Thielen, and they're trying to see what they have in the young guys, in Mingo, etc. So, unfortunately, Thielen is getting screwed here a little bit because of circumstance, but we have to adjust accordingly. And for that reason, all the Panthers wide receivers are sits. Then 49ers at the Eagles. Another game that I really like for wide receiver purposes, Brendan Ayuk, Deebo Samuel. They're both going to have to be heavily involved versus this high-octane Eagles offense. And then for the Eagles, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, same type of situation versus this good 49ers team. So I like all of these guys as high-end wide receiver 2s. Then Browns at the Rams. I'm only starting the Rams wide receivers in Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Both are coming off disappointing performances, let's be honest. But, anytime your running back, Kyron Williams, goes for 50, basically, fantasy points, there's not going to be many other points to go around, even though Higbee had 2 touchdowns last week as well. So, pretty crazy. I do think that we are going to see less high performances from Cooper Kupp and Nakua because of the return of Kyron Williams. But this Browns defense, I think can bottle him up a little bit. So I'm still going to start Kupp. I'm going to still start Nakua. I think you kind of have to with what their upside is and with Matthew Stafford playing. I just think that both are probably in the wide receiver 2 category, especially if the game script goes a different way. And the Browns are just so banged up at quarterback that I don't have faith in any of these Cleveland wide receivers. For that reason, I'm sitting all of them. Then Chiefs at the Packers. I'll go with the top guys respectively. Rashee Rice for the Chiefs, had a really good game last week, and the Packers defense, again, it's not an issue. I think that Rice, he's proven to be the number 1 wide receiver for the Chiefs, even though not super consistently, and he's not a true number 1 wide receiver in the league, or, I wouldn't say even a high-end wide receiver too, but Patrick Mahomes fixes a lot of those issues. For the Packers, Jaden Reed has been the most consistent guy on this team. I know Christian Watson had a good game last week, but I'm going where the consistency has been. I think that's what you have to do when you look at this Packers team. I'm not a believer in Jordan Love, and for that reason, I can't start more than 1 wide receiver on this offense. I'm going with Reed. I'm going to go with the consistency. But whoever you start here for the Packers, they're going to be boom or bust low on wide receiver 2s. Just keep that in mind. Finally, Bengals at Jaguars. From the Bengals side of things, I'm only starting Jamar Chase. Obviously, without Joe Burrow, this offense is completely different, and we've seen it with other teams. Look at the Jets, for example. As great as a wide receiver as you have with Garrett Wilson, if you're neutered at quarterback, that wide receiver is a liability. That's what's happened here with Jamar Chase. I'd still take a chance on him, but he's a wide receiver too. And then for that reason, Higgins and Tyler Boyd are sits. For the Jaguars, I'll start Christian Kirk. I'll sit Calvin Ridley. I know Calvin Ridley's coming off a good game, but I just think game script-wise, this Bengals matchup is going to be much different than what the Jaguars faced versus the Texans. I don't think the Jaguars are going to have to do all that much. I think Christian Kirk is going to be the main guy, and then Evan Ingram, and then the rushing attack, and then the defense, and then Trevor Lawrence isn't going to have to do all that much through the air. So to me, Calvin Ridley, for that reason, matchup-based, is a sit. Kirk is a mid-level wide receiver. But with that, we wrap up our Week 13 fantasy football wide receiver start and sits for every single matchup. If you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear in the comment section, do you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have. We'll do our best to answer them all. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.